everybody, about Dany's interview with Mark Rutte, NATO Secretary General. What did he have to say?
First of all, let me ask everybody, or at least let me ask Susan and Dimitri. Does Elise look pixelated to you guys, or is it just me?
Is Dany just blind?
It also possible.
Also possible.
It is actually also possible. All right, no answers. Guys, tell me, does Elise look pixelated to you guys, or is it just me?
Elise is as pixelated as she's ever going to be. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, she does.
Okay, it's your
Sorry.
Wi-Fi. It's not me. It's all good. We can still hear your voice.
Just blurry.
Do you have a VPN?
No.
I don't know what's going on then, woman. All right. So yes, we had Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of
Geez,
NATO.
both of you do. Maybe that's because it's my connection. I don't know.
Oh, who the
Whatever. Just listen to the sound of our voice and close your eyes and imagine we're
Exactly.
in your living rooms.
Yes, there you
Or we're at a bar, because that's what I feel like doing right now.
Yeah, I didn't even make myself a drink. I was too busy doing stuff. Anyway, Mark Rutte was great. He is a very competent, very no drama, very serious guy. He addressed the Reagan Institute today and did a really good Q&A with one of our former AEI people, actually, who is a senior person there. And then he joined me and Mark for the podcast.
Nice.
I thought, look, he managed all of the questions really, really well. And, we'll put the pod out tomorrow morning at 6. So for those of you who aren't
In the show notes.
put in the show notes. Let me make a note of that because last week I didn't make any notes. But
I'll make the notes.
Okay, even better. Show notes, Mark and Danny's pod with Mark Rutte. We asked him really hard questions. Why are our European allies not behaving like allies? Why do the Spanish suck so badly? All of those kind of questions. He was very articulate. And look, he basically said, look, it took a little time. He said I was very, very upset. He was actually ruder than that about the statements that were made about this isn't our war. And he said, now everybody's come around. He said, they're not saying a lot, but everybody's doing what they need to do. So that was reassuring. I think he had a frank meeting with the president yesterday. The president's really mad, in some ways justifiably. And, but there were a lot of rumors being spread around that the president was going to withdraw from NATO. Nothing like that. Said, we're going to need.
Well, the reason there were those kind of rumors.
You're not pixelated anymore.
Oh, yes. Some people are saying that. But I think one of the reasons is that there are those rumors is, in addition to him kind of threatening to do it, the White House has been telling journalists, because a lot of these White House reporters just parrot what they're told. They're saying that White House officials are saying that he's talking about pulling out of NATO. So they wanted to get that message out.
Yeah, I think so. Again, the problem is,
even though he can't really do that without Congress, he could make it very painful for NATO, but it's a treaty.
So a few things there that should be of interest. Number one, when we say the White House, is never the White House. It's somebody who has an axe to grind who's leaking. Sometimes it's accurate, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's serving a personal agenda, sometimes it's serving the president's agenda. But you and I and our listeners don't ever know who it's serving. All we hear is my White House sources are saying, which is a phrase we all love.
Well, I felt like a lot of times it's like the spokesman kind of just getting a little threat out there. They wanted to have this meeting putting the fear of God in him, I think.
Again, Mark Rutte and the president talk all the time, so he didn't need to signal to him. They talk really frequently. I think they did have a frank, and I think they probably had a reasonably unpleasant conversation. But I think that that was not a bad one. And you'll hear what Ruta has to say about this, which is really interesting. He just basically said, look, I can't get stuff done. I can't get stuff done. I can't persuade people to do things on my own. They don't listen to Mark Rutte. They do listen to Donald Trump. That's how we got to 2%. That's how we're getting to 5%. So, good for him. What I wanted to say to you about Congress, Elise, you are exactly right. Congress passed legislation that required that the president to withdraw from NATO go through.
Marco Rubio was the one that introduced that
I
legislation.
know, an irony of ironies. That's really almost certainly unconstitutional, just FYI. I think it's moot, but I just want everybody to know that that is. So, that's not the way treaties work. A treaty is ratified by Congress, and implementing legislation is also done by Congress, and that is critically important. And a treaty cannot become part of the law of the land without that implementing legislation. But Congress doesn't have the power over unsigning of treaties, and not only
Hmm.
does it not, it's actually pretty clear in even in international law that that's the case. Anyway, that's all an aside because it's moot. Let's talk about Iran. What do you think? You had John Bolton on, my
I
former
had John
colleague.
Bolton, and he has done a lot of interviews, but if I do want to, I think it was a very good interview. Why? Because John Bolton is like a dial quote. Like, you know what I mean? He's very good at like a soundbite or whatever. But we spoke for a half hour and he was, you know what I mean? Like he was able to kind of pontificate a little bit more about, it wasn't in these kind of pithy sound bites. He was laying out his reasoning, which, a lot of times these officials, when they're in government, certainly don't. But, he was like, look, we both know John Bolton is as hawkish as they come on Iran and was a huge supporter of going to war. And in fact, as like you wanted regime change, he said, I have no problem going to war. I just wish it was, you know, I wish it was executed a little, not obviously supportive of what the military gains on the weapons front were. But he said, look, these are things that you and I have been talking about for what are we on the fifth week or sixth week? We've talked about this for 6 weeks now, talking about the strategy, talking about the end game. If we did want regime change, did we have to rush into war? I know we had that uh, target of opportunity with the meeting, but could we have started supporting the opposition with, support and training and resources a little bit earlier and had a much more methodical way of getting this done? And then he talked about the Strait of Hormuz. Um, I personally feel, and you know, this is an informed opinion, but not I wouldn't take it to the bank. I find it very, very hard to believe, since we've been talking about this for years, that Iranian closure of the strait or, would be a casus belli, that somebody didn't say to the president, yeah, we have to think about the Iranians closing the Strait of Hormuz. I think the president probably didn't think that they would.
Um, I think that's fair. I think there was a lot of doubt that they would because they obviously depend on the income. And I think that I think we all have to admit that the Iranians have played a very poor hand reasonably.
Very well.
I don't wanna say very well. Anytime you lose, I had a Substack up this morning in which I
Yeah,
listed the
it was
number of
good.
people. You're pixelated again. A number of people that they had lost, and, look, again, they're losing. This is awful, but, if your number one job is surviving, they're surviving, and I
And
think.
also they have their tactical losses are lining up. And, you know, from a strategic level, the strait wasn't closed before this war. If the president leaves without having it open, and I don't mean this toll booth idea that they just basically give a de facto, okay, well, you run the strait, do it, as long as you let ships go through, okay. Um, I don't think we may be leaving in a stronger position in terms of conventional weapons threats, but this kind of, the Iranians are using this economic weapon very well.
I think that's right. I agree that they're using the weapon well. So I'm hopeful. I don't want to say sure, but I'm hopeful that our European friends and allies, nominal allies, will be in the straight to be helpful to us. There are a number of pretty good ideas. Look, at least we don't know what's going to happen. I think we're all in this sort of state of flux right now because of this timeout, ceasefire, whatever it is. It's all frankly very confusing, and what I wrote is that I don't see how there's any space for agreement.
I don't either.
The president is adamant about Iran giving up, not verification, not I
Handing over.
right, handing over Libya style, right?
Hmm.
Handing over its nuclear materials and its fissile material, and the Iranians aren't going to do it. He's adamant about limitations on their missile arsenal. I think that's easier to fudge for them, but at the end of the day, I don't think I don't think there's any room for agreement, and I don't think there's even a face saver here. Like, let's you and I agree that the thing that JD Vance, as he heads over to our good friend Pakistan's place, that our friend JD would love to come running home with any face saver that gets us out. Because that's where JD is, right? We know that because he's been leaking like a fiend. And I just I don't see how that even happens.
Well, I think JD is, I mean, I thought it was really, I don't want to use the word interesting. I kind of want to just use the word pathetic, so I will. Um, some of the things that JD Vance said over the last couple of days. Number one, I think the Iranians understand English very well. Because I told them blah, blah, and blah. They didn't seem to understand. Or, you know, when President Trump, this is another one that President Trump says that the 10-point plan is a workable plan. I'd love to know what's workable about that plan. Okay. But JD Vance says, well, the media is being very irresponsible. There are a lot of 10-point plans floating around. Um, the Iranians had this one 10-point plan that I threw in the garbage. And then they had another 10-point plan that was a little bit better. And I've seen a third 10-point plan. And so they're trying, and then he's also talking about the new regime. I'm sorry, this isn't the Who's song Won't Get Fooled Again. Here's the new boss, same as the old boss. Like, there is no new regime. There are new figureheads, let's call them. But this regime is no different than the last regime. And the idea that this is a new, responsible regime, and the spokesman, what's her bucket?
Love it.
Levitt, is saying, oh, these are new, more pragmatic, reasonable people. I'm sorry. That's just selling the Americans a bill of goods.
Hmm. Okay.
What do you think? You think they're more reasonable?
No, no, I'm not a fan of the people. Eli Lake has a good, I think, pretty thorough layout of the 5 members of the basically the ruling
Mm-hmm.
individuals inside Iran right now. We've heard of some of them. We know, actually, I've heard of all of them.
Yeah.
Uh, and
Speaker of the parliament.
well, Karlibov
Um,
has been part of this for a long time.
yeah.
Wahidi and others. These are no, these are not new regime people. These
Or
are
moderates.
they're not moderates. And I think the more important point about them is not that they're not new regime people and not that they're not moderates. It is that these are people who are dedicated to preserving the regime as it is.
Yeah.
Look, when we talk about Syria, and you and I both sort of, are still, jury's still out on Ahmed Ashara. When we talk about Ahmed Ashara, we say, look, this is a guy who was a local leader of Al Qaeda, for God's sakes.
But
This
he
is a guy,
wears a suit now and he's,
well, the suit is irrelevant,
I'm kidding. It's a joke.
but the point is that there are people who at least put on a facade of having abandoned their previous ideology.
Exactly. That's what I meant by that.
These guys are not doing. These guys are
Right.
not wearing suits. These
Right.
guys are
Exactly.
not
That's what
wearing.
I meant by that. That's what I
Yes,
meant by that.
exactly. And that I think is problematic. But for those of you who think JD Vance is stupid, I agree that there are plenty of stupid people who graduate from Yale. JD Vance isn't one of them.
I didn't say stupid. I said
I know
pathetic.
one of our commenters did, and that is really what makes him more dangerous, because he is
Hmm.
not, if I may use this term expansively to describe both you and me, and perhaps some of our audience, he is not one of us, right? He is a quote unquote restrainer. He is an isolationist. He is the person who doesn't want to help Ukraine, who doesn't want to be in NATO, who doesn't want to do this Iran, and he's in a very awkward position. So it'll be very interesting to watch. There are many bad things you can say about JD Vance. I have said most of them, but he's not dumb.
And the Iranians know this, and so they prefer to talk to him.
That I don't know. People have been asking me all day, well, why is JD going? And my answer is duh. Honestly, I feel like I know some things, but I don't know that.
Oh, well, what I heard from some diplomats is that Rubio doesn't want any part of this. And he's like, do you think that's true? Rubio's just like, you handle it.
No. Look, again, I'm going to say that generally speaking, the the sentence that is followed by what I hear, that follows what I hear, not with you because I trust you implicitly and your judgment, but is not true. Rubio
Hmm.
is all in on everything, but
He doesn't want to be the face of it, though,
he's
maybe.
not the face of anything except Venezuela.
Hmm. And
He is
maybe Cuba.
He is like the Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemisphere affairs. That
Mm.
really is what he is. He is not the National Security Advisor slash Secretary of State. And he and JD Vance are very matey. I don't know whether it's real or fake. I can't tell. Don't know either of them well enough at all. But Rubio is not engaged because he doesn't want to be engaged. Rubio is sitting out everything except Venezuela and a little bit Cuba. That's weird to me. I don't really get that, but that's a decision that he has made. And by the way, the reason I say this with such certitude is because inside the meetings in the White House,
Mm.
it's not like he's speaking inside and then not speaking outside because he wants to keep away from it. He's not
He's
speaking
not speaking
inside.
inside.
Right, and this is important. Anyway, look, we're gonna find out tomorrow, the next day. JD, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, 2 Jews and a Southerner are gonna be meeting all these amazing the guy who rented Osama bin Laden his house maybe, the guy who supported the Taliban. Oh, no, those are just the Pakistanis. And all of these Iranian terrorists, and that'll be,
I
fascinating.
think we're going to be looking this weekend to see what happens. And I want to ask you what you think about Lebanon. But the fragility of the ceasefire right now, um, I don't think we're going to see, do you, anything coming out this weekend. I think the best that we can hope for is that some kind of process for further negotiations comes out of this. Do you think we're going to see a deal? I think if we do see a deal, it's not the kind of deal you or I would be like, that's a good deal.
No, not a chance. I don't I don't know. This is going to require a go, no go decision on the part of the president. And I feel like I understand where he is, but I don't know where he is, in that 2 week space. I just don't. Is he gonna give them a chance? The one thing that was absolutely crystal clear in his statement was, I'm just pulling it up, which is why I'm looking down. In his statement that he made on I think Wednesday night was that the Iranians, after they open the Strait of Hormuz, and they haven't opened the Strait of
Well,
Hormuz,
what
and
do you make of the idea that one minute he's saying open, next minute he's saying we don't care, it's not our problem. Now he's saying open it again. Like where is he on all of this? And I'm sorry, where why you know, eh, I'm not saying that the president wasn't meeting with Bessent or, that they weren't having talks. But the fact that Bessent wasn't in some of these meetings, in these like key meetings, tells me that they just, this Strait of Hormuz thing, like, I don't know.
You don't need so at least the one thing I'll say to you, which I know is horrifying to almost everybody, especially people on Wall Street, is that, our Secretary of the Treasury is often not involved in national security conversations, even when he should be. You've heard me tell the incredibly funny story about a war game I did where somebody stood up afterwards and said, somebody who stood up who was playing Jamie Dimon in the war game, and they said, and they said, "Well, this is not true to life, because if it were true to life, then you would have been talking to me all the time." And Larry Lindsay, who was the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors in the George W. Bush administration and was the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors on 9/11, stood up. He's a very, very large, very nice man, and he stood up in his very sort of relaxed way, and he said, "Let me tell you, I was chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors on 9/11. No one came to see me. No one came to see me the first day. No one came to see me the second day. No one talked to me." This is sort of, that's the siloing of national security, and he kinda doesn't surprise me at all that
Here's
that
a question. Why doesn't, I mean, maybe this is again like an oil question or an oil markets question. Even when they did the maximum pressure campaign in the past, sanctions on Iran, they never really squeezed them on the oil. Why don't they do that?
they didn't never squeezed you raw on the oil?
Well, they did, but
So
why
in
don't
this
you
in
just
in
completely cut off the oil?
I'm sorry, guys, I know my glasses. Veronate keeps telling me, "Don't wear those glasses, they're so reflecty," but I can't see the comments. But don't wear them. So in the first Trump administration, they managed to reduce the export of Iranian oil to well below, at a certain point, it was below 400,000 barrels a day. It was a very substantial reduction. We got the Indians, we got the Chinese, we got even the Russians to stop buying Iranian oil, and that was devastating for them. Not only that, we saw the ripple effects because Hezbollah started to run out of money. They started to, solicit cash in all sorts of weird ways. So they absolutely have. The problem is 1 month, and I'm not kidding, within 1 month of Joe Biden becoming president, all of that was gone, and they had gone up well beyond 1.5 million barrels per day. Now, could Trump do that? Could Trump have done that again? I think during the period of dialogue, he didn't want to do it. Can he do it again now? Well, this is a very interesting point that actually Dana Stroul made when I was talking to her today. Dana's a former Biden administration
Pentagon.
Pentagon official, and notwithstanding that fact, a really good egg. And she said, the Iranians have found a tool that they may not otherwise have discovered had this war not happened, which is that they actually can have a very serious economic impact in the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. And that's a tool they haven't used. Now, do they use it at will? That will be very interesting. So it does put a new weapon in their hands, and so it makes me question whether our options
Are limited now.
post-war
Yeah.
are as limited as they were pre-war,
Mm.
which is an
Interesting.
question.
Now, talk to me about what you think about Lebanon. I'm wondering if is do you think the Iranians were misled on whether Hezbollah? No. You don't think Trump just didn't tell the Israelis, but he told the Iranians Hezbollah is included?
Hezbollah wasn't included. Lebanon wasn't included. President didn't mention Lebanon, and it was not a thing. It was just not a thing. It was not part of it. Now, that could have been an omission on the part of the Iranians. It could have been a deliberate omission on the part of the Israelis. But you heard what JD Vance said yesterday. It was very unequivocal. He said, Lebanon's not part of this. Now, you saw the news that Israel and Lebanon are sitting down for direct talks. You know what? Lebanon, I'm sure a lot of our listeners know this already, but Lebanon expelled the Iranian ambassador last week. Guess what? He didn't leave. I mean, if you are PNG'd, the idea that you are PNG'd, the persona non grata, not actually a verb, but still, if you are PNG'd, you leave. Now, I understand he didn't want to go back to Tehran because I hear it's a little dicey there. But damn, he didn't leave, and the Lebanese were furious. Does that mean that they like the expansion of the Israeli strikes, particularly on Beirut? No, but the Israelis are leveraging the Lebanese government against Hezbollah. That's their play. That's what they're doing. People may not like it. Write to your congressman.
Apparently, the Lebanese asked for these negotiations a month ago.
With the Israelis.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they've been going back and forth on terms. They have. And now they're talking, look, this is, something? This is amazing. This is wonderful.
Yeah, I know. I just don't understand why. I mean, I guess there have been efforts, and even in the first Trump administration, to try and empower the Lebanese to.
No. The answer is that during the first Trump administration, there were efforts to do it, but the Lebanese were too weak
Yeah.
at
Yeah,
it,
that's what I was going to say.
and their previous government sucked. This new post October 7th war government and President Aoun are, I don't want to say amazing or good, but they're better.
I'm not really sure where the Lebanese are on this, if they're kind of serious or they're just going along to get along. I mean, I guess time will tell if they're willing to go after Hezbollah.
Look, you're right. And of course, time will tell that Hezbollah's been there for almost 30 years.
Look, the Syrians kicked the Hezbollah out. Well, remember that? Remember when they marched them out?
But they weren't Syrians. They were Lebanese. Everybody's
right.
having
True.
So anyway, that's what I know. We'll just have to watch that space.
Okay, quickly. What did you make of our friend JD's trip to Hungary to prop up the president, who now I think is just further after JD left, he dipped even further in the polls. I think the opposition has 70% in polls right now.
I think it'll be a tight election. Look, I can't stand Orban, and I love the fact that JD Vance went there, talked about how outrageous it is for foreign countries to try to interfere in other countries' elections. And I was like, I'm sorry, what did you do? Wait, what? Huh? So that was a little weird, but I agree with you. I think in a lot of ways, JD Vance has what in the olden days we used to call the reverse Midas touch. Everything he touches
turns to shit.
Turns to shit. And the idea that somehow he was the right person to send there, and that he was going to somehow warm the population. I mean, yeah. Look, I asked a couple of my European friends about this, and they said, "Look, we care a lot about what America thinks." And so insofar as JD Vance represents America, that's a good thing for Orban. But in general, I just can't imagine that they thought this was a backfire.
I mean, but we spoke, I don't know, last week or the week before. CPAC is becoming a lot more fringy.
Oh, that's not becoming. That ship sailed.
Okay. Well, but Orban has these ties to this CPAC.
Right.
And he does a CPAC there.
I
And
know.
so I think him and Vance are actually, I mean, Vance has closer ties to that whole group now more than Trump does. I mean, which
Well,
opens up into a question. I know you didn't want to talk about this, and we don't have to talk about it long,
you wanna bring
but
up Tucker?
I'm not going to bring up
You want me to read you something,
Yes, I don't want
that
to.
she
We
said
don't have
in
to talk in particular about Tucker, but I think it's really rich that Tucker, Megan. Did you hear this Megan Kelly rant?
I don't listen to Megan.
Um, that they're like, oh, the Iranian government. I mean,
Oh, please.
we have a hand gesture in Jersey for that.
So Chris sent me just before we went on air. Chris is my colleague who does our government relations, who I love. Sent me a Truth Social post. Did you see this, Elise Levitt? I am going to rock your world. Everybody,
Rock me,
forgive,
baby.
forgive me, and I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but the whole thing is completely ranty. Okay. I know why Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Candace Owens, and Alex Jones have all been fighting me for years, especially by the fact that they think it's wonderful for Iran, the number one state sponsor of terror, to have a nuclear weapon, because they have one thing in common: low IQs. They're stupid people. They know it, their families know it, and everyone else knows it too. Look at their past. Look at their records. They don't have what it takes, and they never did. They've all been thrown off television, lost their shows, and aren't even invited on TV because nobody cares about them. They're nut jobs, troublemakers, and will say anything necessary for some free and cheap publicity. And it goes on from there.
Well, that all happens
Donald
to be
Trump.
true. That all happens to be true.
But that's the
But the
first
fact that
time.
it's Donald Trump just shows you the kind of rift. And
But it's
are
not a
these guys?
matter rift. These people don't represent the electorate. The
Well, they're
electorate
going to support Vance. Believe you me.
Vance may not even be the nominee.
I know, but they're
No,
going to be supporting him as we lead up to 2028, and when he's ready to.
there will be
Um,
many Truth Social posts between now.
there will. I just want to ask you. We didn't really get into this, and I don't want to go into it too deeply. But what did you make of that Truth Social where he was like, a whole civilization will die tonight? I know a lot of times you say Trump, that's Trump rhetoric, but I mean, Bolton said something, and it is kind of true, that Trump doesn't have a filter between his brain and his mouth.
Yeah.
And I just think that was uncool.
Oh, I completely agree. It was uncool, but I think that it's important to sort of understand what it meant directionally, accepting very with no argument
I
whatsoever.
understand what it meant. I understand what he meant. And he wasn't talking about maybe he meant the revolution. I don't, but
No, he didn't. That's the thing. No, he was on Rantomatic, and he says stuff like that, and he shouldn't. And I think we can agree
well,
without
I mean,
contradiction.
forget about, and then the media, like that was all the media talked about, and whatever. Look, there were a lot of Republican congressmen that weren't happy about it.
Okay,
A couple of a couple
no
said
one
so.
cares this much what they think.
Right. I just think, I wish he thought more about how some of these things land around the world. He
Yeah,
doesn't.
yeah, yes, Elise. I too wish he thought more about somehow or thought. I wish that we had presidents that didn't lie to the American people. I wish we did. I wish we'd had one for the last 4 years prior to Trump, but we don't. And yeah, and we're not going to make it so. I will say this, and this is my final word, and I stuck this in my Substack. The only irony I found in this was all of the people who said, "Oh, Donald Trump, war criminal," right? When he tweeted that out. And then in a hot second after the ceasefire announcement said, chicken.
Yeah, he's giving it away.
Right. So I don't understand.
Yeah.
He's a
No,
war,
I know. I know.
but
Look,
he's
it
also
just goes back to the fact that people can't, be dispassionate and objective.
yeah, people suck.
Um,
It's only us.
only us.
Love you. Bye,
Love you.
everybody.
Bye, everybody. See you next week.
Take care.